The pen was already in my hand when my phone lit up across the desk. I was sitting in the parking garage of my uncle's estate attorney's office, engines still running, heat cranked against the January cold. The papers were in my lap. My uncle had been dead for 11 days, and my brother had called 3 times that morning to make sure I was coming to sign. He said it was routine. He said it was just paperwork to close out the estate. He said we needed to do this together, as a family, the way our uncle would have wanted. And then my financial advisor sent me a text that made my whole body go cold. Simone, do not sign anything today. Call me before you walk into that office. Something is very wrong. I sat there with the heat blowing on my face and my hands completely still. My brother's voice from that morning was still in my ear. Warm, brotherly, a little too insistent. Just be there by 2, okay? Don't be late. These things have strict windows. I called my financial advisor back. She picked up on the first ring. Before I even said hello, she started talking. My uncle had no children. He'd spent 40 years building a regional construction company from a single flatbed truck into a firm with $12 million in assets, 3 warehouse properties, and contracts across 4 states. He was gruff and he was generous and he smelled like sawdust. And when he died of a heart attack on a Tuesday morning in November, the only people left in his life who shared his blood were me and my brother. His name was my uncle, and he had always, quietly, treated me differently than my brother. He never said it outright. He wasn't that kind of man. But he let me sit in on his meetings when I was a teenager while my brother was out at parties. He sent me articles about business school. He paid for my MBA without being asked, and when I asked him why, he just shrugged and said, "You're going to need it more than he will." I didn't fully understand what he meant until after he was gone. His will left the company and its assets split between my brother and me, 60% to me, 40 to my brother, with the caveat that neither of us could sell the majority stake without the other's written consent for a period of 5 years. It was structured to protect the company. It was structured, I would later understand, to protect me specifically. My brother had never worked a day in that company. I had. I knew the site managers by name. I knew which contracts were profitable and which ones my uncle had kept out of loyalty. I knew the difference between the 2 warehouses in Dallas and why the one on Industrial Boulevard was worth 3 times what it looked like on paper. My brother knew none of this. What he knew was that 60% of $12 million was $7.2 million, and that it was currently sitting in my name. My financial advisor's voice was careful and controlled in the way that people get when they're trying not to scare you more than the situation already requires. She told me she'd gotten a call that morning from a colleague, a CPA who happened to share a client with the estate attorney my uncle had used. That attorney had recently been flagged by the state bar for improper dual representation, specifically for representing both a deceased client's estate and a third-party buyer simultaneously. There was a buyer already lined up for the company. A private equity group out of Dallas had made an offer 2 months ago, before my uncle died. My brother had been in contact with them for 6 months. The papers I was about to sign weren't a routine estate closing. They were a restructured agreement that quietly transferred majority operating authority to a newly formed LLC, one that my brother had filed in October 2 months before our uncle's heart attack and 3 months before I ever heard the words estate paperwork for the first time. If I signed, I would retain my 60% ownership on paper, but operating authority, the ability to make decisions, approve sales, execute contracts, would shift to the LLC. My brother controlled the LLC, and the LLC had already agreed in principle to sell to the private equity group for a number that would net my brother approximately $4.8 million after his cut. My 60% would be absorbed into the sale at a valuation I had never reviewed, negotiated, or approved. I would get a check. I didn't know how big it would be because I hadn't been allowed to see the offer. But based on the structure my advisor was describing, she estimated my share would come to somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million. for a stake worth 7.2. I sat in that parking garage for a long time after she stopped talking. I want you to think about something for a second. If you've ever been the responsible one in your family, the one who showed up, the one who did the work, the one who stayed in on weekends and answered emails and cared, genuinely cared, about something that your sibling treated like a lottery ticket they were waiting to cash. Do you know that feeling where your body understands something before your brain gives it permission to? I'd had that feeling for 11 days, since the moment my brother had called me 4 hours after our uncle's death, not to grieve, but to ask what the timeline looked like for probate. I'd filed it away. I told myself I was being uncharitable. I told myself that people grieve in different ways, and that my brother had always been careless with words, and that it didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything. I didn't drive away from that parking garage. I sat and I thought, and I did the thing I'd been trained over 32 years of being the sensible one to do. I made a list. I called my advisor back, and I asked her to send me everything she had, every name, every document reference, every date she could pull. She sent it within 10 minutes. I forwarded it to a business litigation attorney I'd been referred to once and never needed. I texted him the short version: potential fraud in estate closing. Papers I'm about to be asked to sign need 20 minutes. He called me back in 8. His name was a name I already knew from a firm on the north side of the city, and the first thing he said was, "Don't go in." Not today. But I was already thinking about what happened if I didn't go in. My brother would know something was wrong. He would regroup. He would find another mechanism, another piece of paper, another window where I wasn't paying attention. He had clearly been planning this for 6 months, which meant he was patient. Patient people don't give up when their first move fails. They wait and try again from a different angle. If I walked away today, I would spend the next year looking over my shoulder at every document, every call, every family dinner where someone said, "Oh, it's just routine." I didn't want to spend the next year like that. "I'm going in," I told the attorney, "but not as the person he's expecting." There was a pause on the line. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said. The first thing I did was leave the parking garage and drive to a UPS store 3 blocks away. I used their document scanner to photograph every page of the papers I'd been given, the ones my brother had emailed me the night before and told me to just print out and bring. I sent the images to my attorney. While I was standing at the scanner, he was reading. By the time I got back in my car, he had confirmed what my advisor had described and added 2 more things she hadn't caught. There was an arbitration clause buried in page 11 that would have stripped me of the right to sue in civil court if I later disputed the valuation. And the signature line at the bottom of page 7 had my name pre-filled in a font that matched the document formatting, meaning someone had prepared this assuming I would sign without reading. I asked him what I needed. He told me. It took me 45 minutes to get it. I went to a notary and had an affidavit prepared attesting that I had not yet signed any documents related to the estate. I called my uncle's original attorney, the one who had drafted the will, not the one my brother was using today, and left a message with his paralegal flagging what was happening and asking for a callback. I called my uncle's longtime office manager, a woman who had worked for him for 22 years, and I asked her one question. Had anyone from my brother's LLC contacted the company's employees in the past 60 days? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Yes. Last week, someone called asking for payroll records and the Dallas lease agreements. We thought it was for the estate." I thanked her and hung up. Then I texted my brother, "Just got turned around in traffic, 5 minutes out." He texted back immediately, "No rush, take your time." He had been waiting for me. He was relaxed. He thought today was already over. The estate attorney's office was on the 4th floor of a building that looked expensive and was. Marble in the lobby, elevator that required a key card. The kind of place that signals, quietly and firmly, that the people inside know things you don't, and you should probably just trust them. My brother was already there when I walked in. He was sitting in one of those wide leather chairs across from the attorney's desk, his jacket off, one ankle crossed over his knee. Relaxed. He looked up when I came in and smiled a smile that I had seen my whole life, the one that meant he was the one who understood how things worked, and I was the one who needed to be managed. "There she is," he said. I smiled back. I sat down. The attorney was a man in his late 50s with the specific energy of someone who charges $400 an hour and considers that reasonable. He shook my hand and started explaining the documents in the smooth, confident tone of someone who had done this 100 times and expected no interruptions. I let him talk. I looked at my brother while the attorney talked. He was watching me with that same relaxed expression, but his foot was bouncing slightly, the way it always did when he was impatient. He wanted me to pick up the pen. He wanted this to be done. When the attorney finished and slid the papers toward me, I didn't pick up the pen. I said, "Before I sign, I have a few questions about the LLC structure on page 4. The attorney blinked. My brother's foot stopped bouncing. "Of course," the attorney said, carefully. "What questions do you have?" "I'd like to understand why operating authority transfers to a newly formed entity rather than being held jointly as the will specifies." A pause, brief but real. "That's a structural efficiency," the attorney said. "It simplifies decision-making." "Whose decision-making?" I asked. "The LLC's managing member handles operational matters." "And who is the managing member?" My brother shifted in his chair. He uncrossed his ankle. "I am," he said. His voice was still even, but there was an edge under it now. "It's just so we're not constantly having to get both signatures for routine things. You know how it is. You've got your own career. This way you're protected without being burdened." I looked at him. I thought about all the times in our childhood he had framed something that benefited him as a favor to me. The way he'd convinced me to give up my room when his college friend visited because you're more easygoing. It'll be easier for you. The way he borrowed money from our uncle and then told me I was being cold for caring about it. The way he had structured an entire fraudulent scheme around the assumption that I was still that person. The girl who deferred. The sister who didn't want to make things difficult. He had known me for 32 years and he still didn't know me at all. "I spoke with a business litigation attorney this morning," I said. The room changed. It didn't happen loudly. Nobody moved dramatically. But the air shifted the way it does when a temperature drops suddenly. You feel it before you see any evidence of it. "I also spoke with my financial advisor," I continued, "and with your LLC's registered agent filing, which is public record, and with Uncle Ray's office manager who mentioned that someone from your LLC requested payroll records and the Dallas lease agreements last week." My brother opened his mouth. "I also have a copy of the preliminary sale agreement between your LLC and the private equity group out of Dallas," I said. "The one dated October 14th, 2 months before Uncle Ray died." That one landed. I watched my brother's face go through 3 things in about 2 seconds: surprise, calculation, and then something that was almost, but not quite, shame. The attorney stood up. He said something about needing to step out and make a call. "Please do," I said. When he left the room, it was just me and my brother. He leaned forward. He lowered his voice the way he always did when he was about to say something he needed to control the narrative of. "Simone, you're misunderstanding the structure. I was trying to protect you. You don't want to run a construction company. You have your own life." "You're right," I said. "I don't want to run it. I want to sell it. On my terms. At fair market value. With an attorney who represents me and not you. We were going to get you a fair." "The offer to your LLC values my stake at roughly 15 cents on the dollar," I said. "Based on last quarter's EBITDA and the Dallas warehouse alone, this company is worth more than twice what your buyer is paying. You know that." That's why the arbitration clause is on page 11. He went quiet. I took out my phone and placed it on the table between us. My attorney is recording this conversation with my consent, I said. That was true. I had called him before I walked in. Anything you'd like to say about the intent of this document, now would be a good time. My brother stood up. He looked at me the way people look at someone they suddenly can't quite read, like I had changed shape while he was watching. I'm going to step outside, he said. The hallway is right there, I said. He left. I sat alone in that room with the marble and the leather chairs and the papers I had not signed, and I felt something I didn't entirely have words for. It wasn't triumph, not exactly. It was more like the specific quiet that comes when you've been carrying a weight so long you stopped noticing it, and then someone lifts it, and you realize how heavy it was only because of how still your arms suddenly are. What happened next took months, not minutes, and I won't pretend it was clean. My brother hired an attorney. His estate attorney resigned from the matter. The private equity deal collapsed when the buyer's legal team ran a title search and discovered the underlying ownership dispute. My uncle's original attorney came out of retirement briefly to provide a sworn statement about my uncle's intent in structuring the 60-40 split the way he had. My uncle's office manager turned out to have kept meticulous records of every contact from my brother's representatives because she'd thought something felt off, and she was the kind of woman who trusted that instinct and acted on it. Those records became part of the legal file. My brother and I reached a settlement 18 months after that afternoon in the attorney's office. We sold the company, both of us agreeing, both signatures, the way the will said, to a regional construction group that kept the employees on and paid a price that a professional valuator had assessed as fair. My brother got his 40%. I got my 60%. We do not speak now. I won't tell you I expected that to feel different than it does. I had this idea, somewhere in the back of my mind, that if things worked out, if I protected myself and the outcome was just, I would feel relief, and the relief would have some warmth in it, like the ending of something that had also been the beginning of something else. Mostly what I feel is clear. I know who my brother is. I know who I am. I know that I was not wrong to love him and not wrong to stop protecting him from consequences. Both of those things can be true at the same time. And carrying that is easier when you stop asking it to resolve into something simpler. My uncle used to say that the best deals are the ones where everybody knew exactly what they were agreeing to. He was right. He was always right. I just wish it hadn't taken losing him to understand that some people in your family are not in a deal with you at all. They are in a deal with themselves, and you are just a line item they forgot to account for. I am not a line item. I never was. I think about that parking garage a lot. The heat running, the papers in my lap, the absolute ordinariness of it. A Tuesday afternoon, gray sky, coffee going cold in the cup holder. Nothing about that moment looked like a turning point. It looked like an errand. That's the thing nobody tells you about the moments that change your life. They don't announce themselves. There's no music. There's just a phone buzzing on the passenger seat and a choice about whether to pick it up. What saved me wasn't luck. I want to be clear about that. My advisor didn't call because the universe intervened. She called because she had been paying attention, because she had been doing her job with the kind of careful integrity that most people only perform when someone is watching. She was watching even when no one asked her to. That's what integrity actually is. It's not the dramatic gesture, it's the quiet habit of doing right by someone, even when doing less would be easier and no one would ever know. And my uncle understood that long before I did. He saw something in me when I was young that I didn't see in myself. Not talent exactly, but a willingness to care about things that didn't immediately benefit me. He cultivated it. He sat me down in meetings and let me watch how decisions got made. He paid for an education I didn't know I needed yet. He built a structure into his will that was specifically designed to protect me from exactly the situation I almost walked into. He knew. He couldn't say it directly, but he knew. The 60-40 split wasn't generosity. It was a warning, dressed up as an inheritance. I used to feel guilty about the way things ended with my brother. I kept turning it over, asking myself whether I'd missed something, whether there was a version of that day where I handled it differently and we both came out whole. I don't ask that anymore. Not because I've stopped caring, but because I've gotten honest with myself about what caring actually requires. Caring about someone doesn't mean absorbing the consequences of their choices. It doesn't mean signing a document that guts your financial future because confronting them would be uncomfortable. Real care for yourself, the kind that isn't selfish but is necessary, means refusing to participate in your own diminishment. What I had to find in that parking garage wasn't courage in the cinematic sense. It was something quieter. It was the willingness to trust what I knew. I had spent years learning that business, learning those numbers, learning the difference between what something was worth on paper and what it was worth in the real world. That knowledge existed. The question was whether I would use it or defer to someone who was counting on me not to. I used it. That's the only thing I know how to tell anyone who is sitting in their own parking garage right now, holding their own set of papers, feeling the pull of just going along because going along is easier. And maybe you're wrong, and maybe you're being difficult, and maybe it will all work out anyway. You are not being difficult. You are not wrong. The thing you know, the thing that made you pause, that made you read page 11, that made you call someone before you walked in, that thing is yours. Trust it like a tool. Use it like one. My uncle left me a company, but what he really left me was the evidence that someone had seen what I was capable of and believed it was worth protecting. I try to live like I deserve that. Most days I think I do.